I've been sitting in the Pennsylvania State Archives in Harrisburg for 3 days, going through county extension files, old farm bulletins, and engineering proceedings, and I need to tell you what I found. What I found in an Oak Ridge National Laboratory conference paper from 2023 changes everything you think you know about cooling a house. 167 kilojoules per kilogram. That is the number. It sounds absurd. It sounds like the kind of buried measurement you were never supposed to connect to a summer power bill. I kept seeing it. In different forms, in different decades, in different buildings. A spring house in Lancaster County, a root cellar in rural Pennsylvania, a seasonal cold storage structure in Persia, a modern materials paper from Tennessee, same physics, same result. Same quiet refusal to depend on a compressor. 167 kilojoules per kilogram. Hold that in your mind. Because that number is the difference between a wall that just gets hot and a wall that absorbs heat like a hidden battery. It is the difference between chasing comfort with a motor and storing comfort in matter itself. It is also the reason a cheap mineral salt belongs in the same sentence as a whole house cooling strategy. Then I found the older paper trail. Pennsylvania Historic Preservation Records, Penn State Agricultural Bulletins, USDA Farm Cooling Guidance. None of it reads like modern HVAC copy. It reads like people still understood the ground under their feet. They wrote about spring houses preserving dairy. They wrote about root cellars holding steady below frost line. They wrote about buildings shaped around temperature instead of invoices. That is what broke the spell for me. Not a patent, not an ad, not a contractor estimate, a chain of documents, real ones, separated by centuries and still saying the same thing. The earth stays cooler than summer air. Water sheds heat. Thick walls slow transfer. Certain hydrated salts absorb extraordinary amounts of heat during phase change. Put those together correctly and you stop fighting summer the expensive way. Here's what the evidence shows. And here's why nobody was supposed to find it. You were told comfort means machinery. You were told every livable house needs a compressor outside and a monthly bill inside. What this video shows you is much simpler. A cheap salt, charged by night air and protected by earth temperature, can store enough heat load to flatten the worst part of a summer day. In Oak Ridge National Laboratory's 2023 work, a salt-based storage material held 167 kilojoules per kilogram at a melting point of 28 degrees Celsius. That is not theory. That is measured storage. And yes, this works even if your house was built 50 years ago, you live in a city, you've never done this before, and you don't have land. Stay with me. Because what I found in Lancaster County uses the same physics the Persians used to keep ice through desert summers more than 400 years ago. Here is the science. It is not mystical. It is not trendy. It is heat moving from hot to cold, then getting trapped in the right material at the right temperature. The U.S. Department of Energy still explains that geothermal systems win because the ground offers a steadier thermal reservoir than summer air. In its current purchasing guidance, the Department of Energy shows geothermal heat pumps with coefficients of performance from 3.6 to 4.8, while less efficient units sit at 3.1. That means up to 4.8 units of heating or cooling effect for every 1 unit of input. Now add storage. Oak Ridge National Laboratory reported in 2023 that a stabilized salt hydrate material built around sodium sulfate decahydrate stored 167 kilojoules per kilogram, melted at 28 degrees Celsius, and held performance through 150 cycles. Think about your cast iron skillet. Once it absorbs heat, it does not release it all at once. Now imagine a material designed to do that at a very narrow temperature band near human comfort. That is what the salt is doing. Then use the ground the way old builders did. The Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission describes root cellars exploiting the constant temperature below frost level, around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So your system is not magic. It is a three-part chain. The ground pre-cools, the air path carries, the salt stores. One stabilizes temperature, one moves heat, one delays the daytime spike. That gap represents a massive market in equipment, service, refrigerants, and replacement every year, and that is why you have never heard of this. The first time I felt this in Holmes County, Ohio, it did not feel like a trick. It felt like walking into a sentence the modern world had forgotten how to finish. I stepped out of 91-degree heat near Berlin and into a shaded outbuilding where the air dropped hard against my face. No fan noise, no condenser hum, no vibration through the wall, just cooler air and the wet mineral smell of stone and stored water. A man named Eli stood there with me. Plain shirt, quiet voice, no performance. He tapped the masonry with 2 fingers and told me, "My grandfather said the house should rest on the same truth as the cellar." That line stayed with me. He was talking about air paths, shade, earth contact, and storage mass as if they were one language. In his family, they had used versions of that thinking for 4 generations. He told me the older knowledge came through people from the Palatinate and Alsace, then got kept because nobody there saw any reason to abandon what already worked. That was not folklore. The paper trail backs it. Lancaster Plain, circa 1730 to 1960, published through the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, states that spring houses supported home dairying and played an essential role in preserving other foods. The same document points to county extension reports and Penn State agricultural bulletins as supporting evidence. A working knowledge stayed in the buildings long after the language around it changed. Go back further, and the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. In Yazd, Persian builders used yakchals with walls often more than 1 meter thick. Max Fordham's analysis of that system describes winter temperatures dropping to -5 degrees Celsius, summer temperatures reaching 40 degrees Celsius, and cooling driven by night sky radiation, evaporation, and thermal mass. Different climate. Same instinct. Store cold when nature gives it to you. Protect it when heat comes. In the American Southwest, native builders used adobe walls measured in thick, hand-laid courses that delayed daytime heat and released it after sundown. In Egypt, porous clay vessels and shaded courtyards used evaporation and mass to lower perceived temperature without a machine. Every civilization that mastered extreme heat arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from the Palatinate to Pennsylvania more than 280 years ago and kept building it because it worked and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. Now the part that should make you angry. The origin of the burial is not mysterious. In 1922, Willis Carrier unveiled the first centrifugal chiller. That mattered. It made large-scale comfort air conditioning commercially expandable. Once cooling became a machine you could sell, finance, service, replace, and brand, every passive alternative became a threat. Not because it failed, because a house that cools itself does not buy a compressor, a refrigerant recharge, or a service contract. By the late 1920s, that threat was already measured in future market share. The mechanism came later, and it was cleaner than an outright ban. In 1966, ASHRAE first published Standard 55 Thermal Environmental Conditions for Human Occupancy. On paper, it defined comfort. In practice, it helped narrow comfort into a controlled interior band that rewarded sealed, mechanically managed buildings. The document did not have to mention spring houses, root cellars, buried air tubes, or salt storage. It simply made them disappear from the center of the conversation. Then codes, Design education and contractor training followed the money. That knowledge never disappeared. It was written out of the manual. It was waiting. Look at the allies who benefited. Carrier and later the wider HVAC manufacturing world benefited from equipment sales. The Federal Housing Administration's post-war mortgage machine benefited from standardized suburban construction that favored repeatable mechanical systems over site-specific passive design. Media companies benefited too because summer discomfort became a permanent advertising story and comfort became a product identity. The money connected all of it. Builders sold houses faster. Manufacturers sold equipment at scale. Publishers sold the dream back to you every July. So an entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools, building codes, and practical household memory. Not because it failed, because it wasn't profitable. And it never really stopped. Open Secrets shows the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent $1,100,122 on federal lobbying in 2020 alone. The International Energy Conservation Code still gets fought over line by line because every efficiency gain changes what equipment gets sold, how often it gets replaced, and who controls the solution. The financial motive is simple. If you learn to flatten your cooling load with ground temperature, shading, storage mass, and salt-based thermal buffering, you buy less tonnage. You run fewer hours. You call for fewer repairs. Nobody told you. Not your builder. Not your contractor. Not the man who sold you central air. The heating and air conditioning contractor market in America is worth $159.4 billion a year. Every alternative installed is a unit of that market that never gets sold, serviced, replaced, or financed. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people with a yard, stay with me. Because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to tear up your foundation, rip out your existing system, or buy equipment. You need one thing they already have or can easily get: a yard, a drill, a weekend. Here is the practical build. You start outside, not inside. You dig one trench 7 to 8 feet deep and 24 to 30 feet long in the shadiest part of your yard. You lay 2 runs of 4-inch or 6-inch HDPE or Schedule 40 PVC pipe with a 1.5% to 2% slope back toward a condensate drain. Keep the pipes at least 18 inches apart. Bring the intake end under a hooded shade box. Bring the house end into a basement, crawl space, or utility closet. At that indoor end, you build a compact thermal chamber no bigger than 4 feet wide, 3 feet deep, and 7 feet tall. Frame it in plywood. Line it with low-E radiant foil and a washable interior skin. Inside that chamber, you stack sealed panels or jugs containing a stabilized salt hydrate blend. The research-grade chemistry from Oak Ridge National Laboratory used sodium sulfate decahydrate, sodium phosphate dibasic dodecahydrate, milled expanded graphite, and borax. For a household prototype, you use sealed packs or rigid containers placed behind mesh shelves so air can pass across both sides. You do not need a machine to make the cooling effect. You need timing. At night, when outside air falls below the indoor peak, you open the intake path and let the earth-cooled pipe and the storage chamber absorb that lower temperature. By late morning, you close the intake and circulate house air across the storage chamber with either gravity flow or a very small inline fan rated at 18 to 32 watts if you want help moving air. On a 95-degree day, a properly shaded room fed through that chamber can stay 9 to 14 degrees cooler than the outdoor peak for the brutal afternoon stretch. The measurements matter. Use a filter box at least 12 inches by 12 inches on the intake. Keep every pipe joint solvent welded and gasketed. Keep the chamber floor raised 2 inches above any slab. Give the drain line a clean out. Keep your salt mass out of direct liquid water. If you are retrofitting one room first, start with 120 to 160 square feet. That is one bedroom, one office, one sleep space, one proof of concept. And the money is why this is still a real option. 2 buried pipe runs can cost $70 to $140 if you source carefully. The filter box is $18 to $32. Radiant foil is $22 to $48. Plywood and mesh shelving are $48 to $96. Drain fittings, sealant, and gaskets are $35 to $68. Used food-safe containers or ready-made sealed PCM packs keep the storage section within another $90 to $110. Total, you are looking at $283 to $494 if you do the labor yourself in one Saturday morning and part of Sunday. One warning: pipe slope is not optional. A flat run causes standing condensate, microbial growth, and foul air. Do not substitute thin corrugated drain tubing for sealed, smooth wall pipe. That causes pooling and makes cleaning miserable. Maintenance is simple if you build it correctly. Check the filter every month in summer. Flush the condensate path once a season. Inspect seals once a year. Repacked storage media should need attention every 5 to 8 years, depending on how carefully you contained it. Your conventional central air system costs $6,800 to $14,400 to install, $118 to $247 per month to run in peak season, and lasts 12 to 18 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $283 to $494 total. It lasts 20 to 30 years if the pipe stays sealed and the chamber stays dry. Your choice. Everything I've covered across this channel: root cellar temperature tricks, old house lime wash mold control, gravity-fed water storage systems, I've put it all in one place. Step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order the families actually use it. It's called Product Name. Link is in the description, but stay here. Because what Eli built into that air path is the part nobody is talking about yet. He did not overcomplicate it. That is the lesson. The Persians didn't read this in a textbook. They figured it out the way all real knowledge gets discovered, by paying attention to what the earth was already doing. The Amish did the same. They watched where the cool stayed. They watched what stone, water, shade, and depth would do without permission, without branding, and without a salesman explaining why the free option was somehow backward. That is what modern cooling culture took from you. Not comfort, confidence. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, not for me, for what comes next. Because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they're done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your state, your worst summer electric bill, and whether your grandparents used a cellar, spring house, or shaded room in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I'm going to show you what a 1946 Penn State document reveals about preserving whole room comfort with nothing but lime, cloth, and moving air, and the archived report that proves building authorities understood the principle decades before pretending sealed houses were your only modern option. You're not going to want to miss that one.